Hello, I'm Janine Turner, founder of Constituting America. Welcome to our annual scholastic study, History Holds the Key to the Future. This year's study is entitled The Genius of America, A Journey into Our Republic, a study on Alexis De Tocqueville's Democracy in America. Quote, "If nothing else, the same political party could ultimately be on opposite sides of the national banking issue, demonstrating de Tocqueville's point." End quote. Horace Cooper. This essay is entitled Parties in the United States, Volume 1, Part 2, Chapter 2 of Democracy in America by Alexis De Tocqueville. Guest essayist Horace Cooper. Pages 166 through 170. On parties in the United States, de Tocqueville offers stringent analysis of the political parties in the U.S. at the dawn of the 19th century. At the time of his writing, there was one large party that was dominant, the Republican Democratic Party, which ultimately came to be called the Democratic Party. This party had managed to outmaneuver and outlived the Federalist Party and the Whigs. In fact, today, the so-called Democratic Party is the oldest continuously existing party in American history. Founded in 1828, it is also the oldest political party in the world. According to de Tocqueville, the longevity of this party isn't a sign of its greatness, but counterintuitively a sign of its smallness. To appreciate this insight, one has to understand de Tocqueville's understanding of political parties. He divided them into two categories, great and small. He wasn't referring to size. Instead, he was talking about philosophy and impact. Great parties are motivated by principles rather than by specific conflicts or disagreements. Great parties promote the interest of the whole nation rather than appealing to subset groups within. In his view, then, the dead Federalist Party was in fact great. It was populated by some of the most prominent members of society and, importantly, of the Revolutionary War, men like John Adams, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay. These individuals, and others like them, had served in key roles during the War of Independence against Great Britain, as well as within the first government set up by our Constitution. In fact, many of these individuals were instrumental in the creation of the government in both drafting and selling it to the American people. Even after its collapse, the Federalist Party has had a lasting impact on the American system by laying the foundations for having a national economy, promoting the acceptance of a national judicial system, and formulating principles of foreign policy. In contrast, the Democratic Party was viewed by de Tocqueville as a small party. Its issues agitate rather than support the broader society. Small parties, he argues, lack a political faith. That is, remain constant on a principle regardless of circumstance. A small party is, quote, stamped with a selfishness that shows openly in each of their acts, end quote. De Tocqueville uses the national bank as an example of the distinction between great and small parties. He argues that the, quote, Enlightenment classes, end quote, are generally in favor of the national bank and the population at large are not. Rather than focus on the benefits and cost of the national bank, which was created by the Federalist Party with that in mind, the Democrats used its unpopularity with the public as a wedge to have it eliminated. This choice by a small party may help it succeed in the short run, but in the long run may not be great for society. Remember, the national bank was set up as a means of dealing with war debt and to help fund the government's other debts. It was empowered to issue currency as well. Ironically, though, the Democrats were successful in ending the charter of the National Bank in 1811, and by 1816, A new national bank was created for many of the same reasons as before, this time the War of 1812. However, even that bank was ultimately killed by the Democrats. Nearly 100 years would pass before the Federal Reserve was created in 1912. Ironically, another Democrat would sign the law creating the Federal Reserve, a national banking system, after the concept had been killed by a Democrat, Andrew Jackson, in 1836. If nothing else, the same political party could ultimately be on the opposite sides of the national banking issue, demonstrating de Tocqueville's point. De Tocqueville claims that great parties try to unite the interest of the country, while small parties carelessly divide them. In this case, he uses the divide between the wealthy and the rest of the population as an example. Whereas the Federalists supported laws that sought to protect the interest of all citizens of the U.S., as a great party would do, the Democrats sought to pit the broader American society against the wealthy. In fact, this willingness to look at the broader impact of national policy led to the Federalist Party not being nationally popular, according to de Tocqueville. Only because the national government was so limited in its authority did this phenomenon not create great havoc in the first 100 years of Americans' existence. But by the start of the 20th, as the federal government expanded its authority, this wedge proved quite powerful in allowing for the creation of greater taxation and business regulation, the super regulatory state that exists today. Whether political parties are small or great, they still serve a useful purpose. De Tocqueville says that the political parties are an inherent evil as they provide a constructive way for factions to compete with one another. In contrast, without parties, there is the inherent risk that rival nations form within a given country. And when those rivals are unable to resolve their differences, then a civil war becomes likely. While de Tocqueville made his observations nearly 3 decades before the U.S. Civil War, his insights were quite profound. Many of the conflicts that the Federalists recognized, the importance of America being a thriving commercial republic versus an agrarian one, the broader goal of citizen equality, including blacks, and the benefits of limited government were ultimately unable to be permanently resolved without military conflict. Even though he had hoped that the competition among parties would allay conflict, his observations have largely held true. Though today political parties may not be, quote, great, end quote, their existence creates a way for Americans to work through their differences without physical force. Like them or not, for de Tocqueville, that is a ringing endorsement for their existence. This essay was written by Horace Cooper. Horace Cooper is a writer and legal commentator. He has appeared on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox, as well as in a variety of print publications. He is also a research fellow with the National Center for Public Policy Research and a senior fellow with the Heartland Institute and the director of law and regulation at the Institute for Liberty.